Every year, millions of people celebrate Christmas on December 25th. Churches light up with candles, families gather around decorated trees, Christmas carols fill the air. But here's something surprising. The Bible never mentions December 25th as Jesus' birth date. Not once. But the Bible does give us answers. Hidden in its pages are clues that show us when Jesus was really born. Ancient calendars from the temple, shepherds in the fields, orders from the Roman emperor, even the stars in the sky. All these clues point to the real date. What if we could actually prove when Jesus was born? What if every detail was planned so perfectly that the truth has been right there all along, just waiting for us to find it? Today we're going to follow the evidence. Real clues from the Bible and from history. And what we discover is so clear, so precise, that it will change how you see that special night. The story you think you know is about to get a lot more interesting, because when God sent His Son into our world, nothing happened by accident. Let's start with what the Bible actually says. Luke tells us about shepherds watching their sheep when angels appeared to announce Jesus' birth. Matthew tells us about wise men who followed a star from the east. But neither gospel gives us an actual date. No December, no specific month. The exact day is never mentioned. So where did December 25th come from? History shows us that this date became tradition around 300 years after Jesus died, during the time of Emperor Constantine. The Romans already had a big celebration on December 25th. They called it the birthday of the unconquered sun. When Christianity spread, church leaders decided to celebrate Jesus' birth on this same day. They turned a Roman holiday into a Christian one. There's nothing wrong with celebrating Christmas on December 25th. It has brought joy to people for centuries. But if we want to know what really happened, if we want the full picture, we need to dig deeper. The Gospels don't give us a date, but they give us something better. A timeline. Real details that let us calculate backward to find the answer. The key isn't found by looking at Jesus directly. It's found by looking at John the Baptist. The Bible tells us exactly how many months separated their births. If we can figure out when John was born, we can know when Jesus was born. It all starts in the temple with a priest named Zechariah doing his regular duties. What happens next starts a countdown that leads straight to Bethlehem. Luke chapter 2 verse 8 gives us our first clue. There were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. This might seem like just background information, but anyone who knows about life in ancient Israel understands something important. Shepherds didn't stay outside with their sheep during winter. From November through February, the hills around Jerusalem got cold and rainy. Rain would come down hard. Temperatures dropped at night. During these months, shepherds brought their animals inside to protect them. The fact that these shepherds were living in the fields, staying out there all night, tells us something crucial. It was a time of year when the nights were warm enough to sleep outside, when there was enough grass for the sheep to eat. Spring or early fall would fit. Winter doesn't. But there's something even deeper here. The fields around Bethlehem weren't just any pastures. This is where they raised lambs for the temple sacrifices. For generations, priests had come to these exact hills to pick perfect lambs. Lambs whose blood would be used to pay for people's sins. And on one of those mild nights, angels appeared to these shepherds with a message of hope. The true Lamb had been born. The one who would bring forgiveness and new life. The same hills that had raised lambs for sacrifice were chosen to hear the news of the Lamb who would save the world. Even creation seemed to be part of the plan. The season, the location, the symbolism. Nothing was accidental, and the next clue confirms it, an order from the Roman emperor that fulfilled ancient prophecy. Luke chapter 2 verses 1 to 3 tells us about something that changed everything. In those days, Caesar Augustus ordered a census of the entire Roman world. This was the first census while Quirinius was governor of Syria. Everyone had to go to their own town to register. This wasn't just paperwork. This was how Rome controlled people, cold, efficient, and uncaring about how it affected lives. But even the emperor's order served God's plan. It forced Joseph and Mary to travel from Nazareth to Bethlehem. And Bethlehem was exactly where the Messiah had to be born. 700 years before this, the prophet Micah had written, "But you, Bethlehem, though you are small, out of you will come a ruler over Israel." Micah 5:2. An emperor who knew nothing about this prophecy gave an order that made it come true. But there's another detail here that helps us know the timing. Romans never did censuses in winter. They were practical. They needed people to travel. They needed roads to be clear. They needed food to be available. Late summer or early fall had all of these. Winter didn't. Think about what Joseph and Mary faced. More than 80 miles of travel, mostly on foot, or maybe with a donkey. Mary was about to give birth. Traveling in cold rain through muddy roads with nowhere to stay along the way, it would have been nearly impossible and very dangerous. But in autumn, dry roads, good weather, fresh harvests to feed travelers, it makes sense. Everything fits. And the next clue goes even deeper, to an ancient calendar that had been counting down to this moment for centuries. This next piece of evidence is really precise, almost like math. And it starts with a priest named Zechariah, John the Baptist's father. Luke 1:5 tells us that Zechariah belonged to the priestly division of Abijah. This detail matters more than you might think. The priests in Israel worked on a strict schedule. 1 Chronicles 24 explains how King David divided them into 24 groups. Each group served in the temple for 1 week at a time, from Saturday to Saturday. They kept this rotation all year, except during 3 big festivals, when all 24 groups served together. Abijah's division was the 8th group. Historical records and Jewish tradition help us figure out when they served. In the year scholars call 5 BC, the rotation started in early spring. By the time we count through the first 7 groups and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, when all priests served together, we get to Zechariah's turn in late May or early June. But it gets even more specific. The week right after Zechariah's regular service was Pentecost, another major festival when all priests had to be in Jerusalem. This means Zechariah served 2 weeks in a row, his regular week plus the festival week. Luke 1:8-13 describes what happened during this time. While Zechariah was burning incense in the holy place, the angel Gabriel appeared with news. His wife Elizabeth, though old and unable to have children, would have a son. And verses 23-24 are very precise about what happened next. When his time of service ended, he went home. After this, his wife Elizabeth became pregnant. If Elizabeth got pregnant shortly after Zechariah came home in mid-June, we can count forward. John the Baptist would have been born about 40 weeks later, in late March or early April of the next year, 4 BC. Now here's where everything connects. Luke 1:26 tells us that, in the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, God sent the angel Gabriel to Nazareth to a virgin named Mary. That would make Mary's conception around December, and 9 months from December brings us to September, early fall of 4 BC. Let's trace the timeline step by step. First, Zechariah serves in the temple during the 8th division, late May to early June, 5 BC. Second, Elizabeth gets pregnant shortly after he comes home, mid to late June. Third, John is born 40 weeks later, late March or early April, 4 BC. Fourth, Mary gets pregnant in the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, around December, 5 BC. Fifth, Jesus is born 9 months later, September or early October, 4 BC. The temple calendar, set up centuries before Jesus was born, was counting down to this moment. Even the rhythm of priestly service, week by week, rotation by rotation, was part of God's plan. The sacred routine of worship had been preparing, generation after generation, for the exact hour when heaven would send the promised Messiah into the world. While the priests were keeping time on earth, signs were forming in the sky, signs that would guide travelers from far away to a stable in Bethlehem. Matthew chapter 2 tells us that wise men from the east saw a star and followed it to Judea, looking for the newborn King of the Jews. For centuries, people have wondered, what was that star? Was it a miracle? Just symbolic? Or something we can actually track? Modern astronomy gives us an amazing answer. In the year 7 BC, something extraordinary happened in the night sky. Jupiter, which ancient people called the king planet, and Saturn, the planet they connected with the Jewish people, came together in a rare event. This wasn't just one night. Over several months, these two planets appeared to meet 3 times. It created a celestial show that people could see all across the ancient world. And it all happened in the constellation Pisces, which ancient astronomers linked to the land of Israel. To the Magi, experts in reading the stars, familiar with ancient prophecies, this would have been unmistakable. A king of the Jews, born in Israel. When did this happen? September through December of 7 BC, with the most dramatic moment in September. This was a cosmic announcement visible for months, guiding seekers from Babylon or Persia westward to Judea. By the time they arrived in Jerusalem asking, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews?" It had already happened. Jesus had been born. The star had marked the moment. The heavens themselves testified. With precision that astronomers can still verify today, the sky proclaimed what the prophets had said long ago, that a ruler would come from Bethlehem, that nations would seek him. The stars announced it across the sky. God spoke through Scripture. He spoke through prophets. And he spoke through creation itself, arranging planets in their paths so that even people who had never heard of Israel's Messiah would know. Something world-changing had happened in September of that year. But there's one more layer to this, a connection so powerful that it changes how we understand what it meant for God to send his Son in human form. The festivals of Israel were about to give that moment its deepest meaning. John chapter 1 verse 14 contains one of the most beautiful statements in all of Scripture. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. Most English Bibles say dwelt, but the Greek word John uses is eskenoson, which literally means to set up a tent or to tabernacle. John was making a direct connection to the Feast of Tabernacles, one of Israel's most important celebrations. He was showing us something much deeper than just saying Jesus lived with people. The Feast of Tabernacles, called Sukkot in Hebrew, happened every year in early fall, late September to early October. For 7 days, Jewish families would build temporary shelters and live in them. This helped them remember the 40 years their ancestors spent in the wilderness after leaving Egypt. It was a celebration of God's presence with his people, God who lived among them in a pillar of cloud during the day and fire at night. God who met them in the tabernacle, the tent where heaven touched earth. But the festival season actually started 10 days earlier with the Feast of Trumpets, Rosh Hashanah. on the first day of the 7th month. Trumpets would sound all across Israel, announcing the beginning of the holiest time of year. In Jewish tradition, this feast became known as the day of the king's coronation, when God's rule over creation was proclaimed. Now imagine this. What if Christ was born during this sacred season? What if the King of Heaven entered the world as trumpets announced his arrival? What if the Word became flesh exactly when Israel was preparing to celebrate God's presence among them? The symbolism becomes perfect. Emmanuel, God's presence with us through his Son, appearing during the very days when his people celebrated his nearness. The God who once lived in a tent in the wilderness was now sending his Son in human form, living in the ultimate tent, a human body, the eternal stepping into time, the infinite becoming limited. There's a practical side to this too. Luke tells us that when Joseph and Mary got to Bethlehem, there was no room at the inn. Why would inns be full? During the fall festival season, Jewish families from all over would travel to Jerusalem and nearby towns to celebrate. Bethlehem, just a few miles from Jerusalem, would have been packed with pilgrims building their temporary shelters, getting ready for the feast. The crowded inns fit, the timing fits, the theological symbolism fits. Every thread comes together, the priestly calendar placing Jesus' birth in September, the shepherds out in mild weather, the star appearing in September of 7 BC. And now the fall festival season, from trumpets announcing the king to tabernacles celebrating his dwelling. If Jesus was born during this time, the meaning becomes impossible to miss. The king announced by heavenly trumpets, God's Son living among his people. And one day, those same trumpets will sound again when he returns. But even this perfect harmony of prophecy and festival is confirmed by one more witness, history itself. And it comes from an unlikely source, the rule of a fearful, murderous king. Matthew chapter 2 tells us that when Herod heard of a newborn king, he reacted with fear and rage. History remembers him as ruthless, paranoid, and addicted to power. When he failed to get information from the Magi, he issued one of the darkest orders in the New Testament. Every boy in Bethlehem 2 years old and younger was to be killed. A horrifying decision, but one that unintentionally gives us a precise place on the timeline. The Jewish historian Josephus records the key detail. Herod died shortly after a lunar eclipse and before Passover in the year 4 BC. That single fact becomes a boundary line. Jesus had to be born before that eclipse, and not just weeks before, long enough for the Magi to travel, for Herod to realize he'd been deceived, and for the order to be carried out. That's why he targeted every boy 2 years old and younger. He was covering a time range. When we place these events together, the window becomes very narrow. Jesus was born while Herod was still alive, but not earlier than the priestly timeline we saw with Zechariah and Elizabeth. Most conservative scholars land in the same place, between 7 BC and 5 BC, with 5 BC the strongest match. It gives time for the star to appear, for the travelers to arrive, and for Herod's rage to unfold. Far from contradicting scripture, history locks into place like another piece of a puzzle. The ancient historian, the frightened king, the innocent children, the flight to Egypt, every detail fits the same season. And once Herod dies in early 4 BC, the curtain closes on that chapter. The Messiah had already arrived, the prophecy had already been fulfilled, and the world would never be the same again. Now that every piece is on the table, the picture becomes impossible to ignore. The birth of Jesus wasn't placed randomly in the calendar. Each clue locks into the next like gears turning in perfect timing. The shepherds were outside at night, something that only happened when the evenings were mild, Pastures were open and rain wasn't pouring down. That alone pushes us out of winter and into spring or fall. But the census adds even more weight. Rome didn't move millions of people across an empire during storm season. They chose dry roads, safe travel, and harvest time. Again, fall becomes the most logical moment. Then the temple calendar steps in with mathematical precision. Zechariah's division serves in late spring. Elizabeth conceives shortly after. 6 months later, Mary receives Gabriel's announcement. 9 months after that, Jesus is born. The timeline points to early fall of 4 BC. Astronomy paints the same picture. Jupiter and Saturn rising together in the skies of Israel in September of 7 BC, announcing a Jewish king to astrologers in the east, giving them months to prepare their journey. And then comes one of the most beautiful pieces, the Feast of Tabernacles. A season of joy, of families living in temporary shelters, celebrating the God who tabernacled among his people. John's language suddenly becomes clear. The Word became flesh and set his dwelling among us. Finally, Herod's death seals the window shut. Jesus had to be born before early 4 BC. All the evidence, scripture, history, tradition, astronomy, climate, and the priestly rotation, now lines up into one conclusion. The early fall, most likely September of 4 BC. Even the rest of Jesus' life fits the pattern. If he was born in early fall and began his ministry at about 30, then a 3.5-year ministry ending at Passover places his crucifixion in AD 30 or 31. The numbers line up just as smoothly as the prophecies. Everything, every sign, every clue, every prophecy points in the same direction. This was God writing history with purpose. So, where does this leave us? Some people may still debate the date. December 25th will continue to be celebrated, and there's beauty in that tradition. But what we've discovered here is something deeper than a date. It's a pattern, a fingerprint of divine precision woven into every detail of Christ's arrival. From the priestly schedules in the temple to the movements of distant planets, from the routines of shepherds to the orders of emperors, from the sacred festivals of Israel to the rule of earthly kings, everything moved according to a plan set before time began. The evidence shows beyond doubt. God planned every detail with perfect precision. We can trace it, we can calculate it, we can see how heaven and earth lined up in September of 4 BC during the holiest season of Israel's calendar. Trumpets announced the king. The nation prepared to celebrate God's presence among his people through his Son. And that's exactly what happened. The Word became flesh and lived among us. But what about December 25th? Why has that date endured for so long? Historically, early Christians weren't focused on identifying the exact day of Jesus' birth. For them, the date itself carried symbolic meaning. Many of the early church fathers held an ancient belief that great men died on the same day they were conceived, a tradition that, while not based on historical evidence, gave theological meaning to the date. Since the Gospels show Jesus dying during Passover, the time of the spring equinox, they reasoned that his conception occurred around that same season. Counting 9 months forward from the spring equinox brought them to the winter solstice, which in the ancient Julian calendar fell on December 25th. So while December 25th was not chosen because it matched the real date of his birth, it became a symbolic day to honor the miracle of the Incarnation, the moment when God sent his Son in human form and light entered the world at the darkest time of the year. The real miracle isn't the exact day on the calendar. It's the truth that God sent his Son into history. The promised Messiah entered our world. The Word became flesh. But here's the question that matters most. If the Word truly lived among us then, does he live in you now? If God cared enough to arrange every detail of history for that moment, The stars, the calendars, the prophecies, the very math of time. How much more does he care about the details of your life, your struggles, your questions, your searching? The story of his birth continues today, in every heart that receives him, in every life that surrenders to his presence, in every soul that hears the same message the angels brought on that fall night. Don't be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all people. The date is no longer a mystery, but the meaning is eternal. God sent his Son at the perfect time, in the perfect way, fulfilling every prophecy and arranging every detail of creation to announce one truth. Emmanuel, God's presence with us through his Son. And he still comes to every heart willing to receive him.